Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, it gives me great pleasure to address you all here today at the 2021 Global Security Forum on Cooperation or Competition, Changing Dynamics of Global Security, hosted by the Sufan Center. Allow me to begin by expressing my thanks to the Sufan Center for its continued and long-standing partnership with CTED, including within the framework of our global research network. 20 years after the 9/11 terrorist attacks, it's just as important to look backwards as it is to look forwards, as we must learn from the past when considering our responses to current and future threats. Over the past 2 decades, we have witnessed the emergence of an increasingly borderless transnational terrorism. We have seen groups such as Al Qaeda and ISIL take control of and subsequently lose considerable territories. We have also seen changes in the structure and size of terrorist cells, including into the transition from centralized to decentralized planning and the growth in the threat posed by lone actors. There have also been changes in the means and tools available to terrorist groups. Unconventional methods have been used alongside conventional methods as terrorists seek to circumvent member states' counterterrorism measures. And new and emerging technologies are now often at the heart of terrorist attacks. Social media, 3D printing, alternative currencies, and unmanned aircraft systems, or drones, are just a few examples of grave concern of such technologies. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, terrorism has no race, tribe, religion, age, or gender. The perpetrators of terrorism come from all walks of life. Terrorism continues to evolve, and yet the evolution is not always linear. Today, Afghanistan is once again an area of significant concern. We are, of course, are deeply concerned at the potential for Afghanistan to once again become a terrorist safe haven for terrorist groups such as Al Qaeda or ISIL KP. In Iraq and the Syrian Arab Republic, ISIL continues to seek or regroup, and ISIL and Al Qaeda affiliates in West, East, Central and Southern Africa continue to explore ways to increase the level and scope of their activities. The growing threat posed by extreme right-wing terrorism or terrorism motivated by xenophobia, racism and other forms of intolerance or in the name of religion or belief is also a major concern. And terrorist and violent extremist groups have also sought to exploit the social restriction and political instability resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. Our approaches in terrorism must take all these varied and complex challenges into account in a comprehensive and unified manner. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, as you all are aware, in the wake of 9/11 attacks, the Security Council adopted Resolution 1373, which continues to serve as the foundation of the international counterterrorism legal framework, providing a broad counterterrorism mandate for the international community. And its many successor resolutions address a broad range of issues in the context of countering terrorism and violent extremism that leads to terrorism, including human rights, gender, incitement, youth, foreign terrorist fighters and returnees and relocators, kidnapping for ransom, border management, soft targets and biometrics, terrorism financing, transnational organized crime, and countering terrorist narratives. Resolution 1373 also established the Counter-Terrorism Committee to monitor member states' implementation of its provisions. And since 2005, its work has been supported by the Counter-Terrorism Committee Executive Directorate called CTED. CTED's initial focus was assisting the committee to conduct neutral, expert assessments of member states' implementation of the relevant Council resolutions. And since 2005, CTED has conducted assessment visits to over more than 100 member states acting on the committee's behalf. These visits and CTED efforts to facilitate the delivery of technical assistance have been critical in supporting states to address gaps in their counterterrorism measures. Together with its desk review, CTED has also maintained a large database of each and every country profile on counterterrorism and countering violent extremism. The global implementation surveys on the implementation of Resolution 1373 and 1624, which are soon to be issued, will provide a global picture of where we are, what has been achieved, and what we could do more and better. The Counterterrorism Committee, with the support of CTED, has also played a leading role in addressing new challenges, including through the development of the 2015 Madrid Guiding Principles on stemming the flow of FTFs and the 2018 Addendum. As CTED's mandate has grown and evolved, the analysis of emerging terrorist issues, trends, and developments has become an increasingly important element of the work. We gather information through our dialogue with member states, first and foremost, but also through our engagement with international, regional, and sub-regional organizations, the private sector, civil society, and the research community through our global research network. Through our analyses of this wealth of information, we have been able to share valuable terrorism-related insights and analyses, not just with the committee and the council, but also with the broader Global Counterterrorism Committee. Within the United Nations counterterrorism architecture, CTED also continues to contribute to the balanced implementation of the Global Counterterrorism Strategy. The strategy adopted in 2006 was reviewed for the seventh time by the General Assembly earlier this year and has enabled the UN system to develop a shared strategic and operational approach in its global efforts in fighting terrorism. In this regard, the United Nations Global Compact has proven to be a useful framework for all relevant entities to work together under their respective mandate under the coordination of the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, today, counterterrorism and countering violent extremism are genuinely whole of UN endeavors. And this helps us not only to combine our efforts in countering the full spectrum of terrorism-related challenges, but also to avoid overlapping or conflicting mandates. However, despite our collective efforts in the fight to fight the scourge of terrorism, we continue to face a range of complex challenges, some of which are linked to the nature of states' responses to terrorism. Human rights abuses in this context, often relating to overly militaristic responses, have continued. Terrorism continues to flourish in a handful of fragile states which face governance-related challenges and lack the resources required to meet their counterterrorism obligations. As we look ahead to the next 20 years, it's vital that we assess our strengths and weaknesses in responding to terrorism and carefully analyze the effects of our individual and collective actions. We must not lose sight of the key principles that must remain at the core of all our counterterrorism efforts. We must maintain our focus on the victims of terrorism. We must ensure that all our policies and programs are evidence-based, gender-responsive, age-sensitive, and human rights compliant. We must ensure a whole-of-society approach in our efforts to counter terrorism, its financing, and the spread of online extremist content. We must ensure that all partners, including non-profit organizations, the financial sector, and the private sector, are included in all our efforts. And eventually, we must recognize that terrorist activities often transcend jurisdictions and borders, including digital borders. The failings of one state can quickly become a threat to all. Continued efforts to strengthen national, regional, and international cooperation must therefore remain a priority. I do thank you.